From self-directed investing to full-service wealth management, all in one place. Committed to helping investors in any life stage with their investing goals. More at schwab.com.
Funding for This Is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Amazon, proud sponsor of WPLN's daily show, This Is Nashville. Engaging our differences so we can discover our unity. More on Amazon's community work at aboutamazon.com.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. On this day, I'm reminded of a few months ago, a show when Republican State Representative Jody Barrett joined us for a wide-ranging episode, and the topic of book banning came up. And he took issue with that term because to him, book banning meant keeping someone from even publishing or selling a book. That is not what seems to be going on, and yet we've got a lot of what people will call book banning going on. What is going on increasingly is that school libraries and now even public libraries are facing more challenges to material, especially material that's available to kids. And so today, as we happen to mark National Library Week, we're going to back up a bit in order to understand how we got to this moment and what new laws have how they've changed the dynamic here in Tennessee. We are not taking live calls today, but we do welcome comments anytime in the chat of the video stream at youtube.com/@WPLN. Thanks for our regular watchers every day. Our guest for the hour, who you see on your screen, Christina Soontornvat. She's an author with more than 20 books she's written for children of all ages. Also a mechanical engineer. Not something we'll talk about today, but there's a story there. Importantly, she's the Tennessee leader of the Authors Against Book Bans. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Angele Latham is a reporter for USA Today with a unique beat. She covers First Amendment issues of all kinds, has been closely following book bans here in Tennessee because she's based at the Tennessean. Welcome.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
And Bruce Berry's back. In fact, he was there with Jody Barrett that day.
Yes, he was.
Opinion columnist for the Tennessee Lookout, past president of the ACLU of Tennessee, and on the board currently. Not that he speaks for them, but certainly it's an organization that has gotten involved in challenging book bans here in Tennessee. So welcome back.
Thank you. Happy to be here, Blake.
Well, let's talk about nothing like diving into the Age-Appropriate Materials Act of 2022. But that kind of is where a lot of what's going on right now started. This focused on school libraries, public schools, requires them to publish a list of all library materials online, create formal policies for selecting and reviewing books, set up a process where parents, students, or staff can challenge books. And if a book is reviewed and deemed not age-appropriate or not aligned with the school's educational mission, school has to approve it. Christina, how different is that from what was already required of school libraries?
Well, that part about publishing lists of books, about having a policy for reconsidering books and where parents could complain, that already existed. And that, in every school district already has a policy like that. So really, with the Age-Appropriate Materials Act, something that was very different there is that it passed in 2022 and then it was amended in 2024. And the amendment is really where I think we're seeing a lot of the stickiness and where you're getting so many books banned. The amendment said that schools could not receive funding if they had materials that contained nudity or descriptions of sexual excitement or sexual conduct or excess violence, and that applied across grades K through 12. So if you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, that's kind of a broad definition. What does sexual excitement mean, or what classifies as excess violence? You would be right. And it is very vague. And the result is that we've seen so many school districts take out hundreds of books. In Monroe County, they removed 574 books. In Rutherford County, they took out 150 books. Knox County, 48 books. And we even see teachers who have been removing their entire classroom libraries just because they're so afraid of running afoul of this very vague and confusing law.
And afoul means losing state funding for the school or something?
Yes.
Angel, do you know?
So that point sometimes is a little vague because essentially the entire act was to make sure that schools don't even have these books on the shelves in the first place. And so they kind of work through and they purge them. But there is a risk of losing funding if they for some reason, like, reconsider these books, and then they just don't remove them or to do that. There's this very vague kind of stance of, like, where do we go next with this? And I think that's a lot of the problems people saw with this act, was that schools were kind of just left on an island trying to figure out, how do we respond to this?
Yeah.
How do we go through these? And I was happy to hear you mention the 574 books, because
This is Monroe County?
yes, in Monroe County.
Which is East Tennessee, right?
Just on the line,
Okay.
yes. This school system, I actually found those books back in 2023 when I was doing my first ever statewide sweep on seeing what books were caught in the 2022 Act. And all of those books, I think almost all of them, were pulled preemptively before any complaints whatsoever, because the school was just concerned that they would have complaints, so they just pulled them. And actually made it incredibly difficult for me to file public records to find these, because I had to carefully craft them for each and every school district, because every single school district handles it differently. They handle the way that they pull their books, they handle the way they file these books entirely differently. And some of them are pulled preemptively, and so I don't even have record that they were pulled for complaints.
I see. Well, but I can see why a school's like, we don't need one more debate at the school board. We'll just take those off the shelves and sidestep the issue. Bruce, what kind of role are we seeing from local school boards on this issue? Has their role changed under this new policy from the state?
Well, I think what's interesting here is that school boards and library boards, when you go beyond schools, of course, to public libraries, but school boards have to deal with how to apply these kinds of lines or restrictions. Angels, the words you used about what gets caught in or swept into these kinds of laws or regulations, that really captures perfectly the dangers of trying to regulate free expression in these kinds of ways. Because what you're doing is, it sounds like you write a law that uses some of the words that Christina was talking about, sexual material or sexual excitement, these other things. These are all terms, when you actually apply them, what's in, what's out, how broadly do they reach? That's where attempts to regulate free expression, like this stuff, inevitably causes problems, well, first for the regulators, which is to say for school boards and library boards, and then ultimately when these cases, if they do end up going to court, then these same fuzzy boundaries have to be addressed by judges and juries and such. So I think to answer your question directly, Blake, what this does for school boards is it puts them in a very difficult position of trying to manage these very fuzzy regulatory systems. Well,
let's drop in on a school board hearing. This is Rutherford County's been dealing with this in the last few months, but back in 2024, here's a parent who was at a school board meeting during public comment period speaking up.
Sexually explicit content should not be in public schools. And for anyone that will bring up the notion that we are just a bunch of book banners, number one, we're not banning books. We simply want to protect children. Number two, what's concerning is that you all think it's okay for children to be viewing pornographic content and explicit material.
Yeah, and at the end of that meeting, the Rutherford County School Board voted to take a handful of books off the shelves to comply with this state law that we're talking about. Angel, obviously, pornographic material. No one even said pornographic material in the school. Like, how is this debate kind of playing out when you watch those school board hearings as you do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really compelling when you see a lot of parents who do have concerns about inappropriate content in their libraries. It's coming from a very sincere place in their hearts. They don't want their kids reading this content before they feel ready to maybe broach the topic with their kids, or maybe just feel ready for their kids to just kind of learn these things on their own. But the way we see it play out in a lot of the lists of books that get removed, or the lists that the board brings forward and say these are our concerns, is that the terminology of sexually explicit material or this or that or whatever terminology is put forth in that meeting at the time has such a wide net of content that is caught. I go through lists and lists and lists of thousands and thousands of books that get flagged, get pulled, get removed, get restricted, get shifted, just get kind of deleted entirely from collections. And these books are so often, they deal with ancient history. I've seen a lot of books on mummies get removed for nudity. I see books on the Holocaust very frequently get flagged and removed. There was about, I think, 30 plus Bible books flagged in Rutherford for nudity issues. These topics that parents are very sincerely concerned about for their kids, there's not really a way to kind of filter it down when you're applying it to an entire library. And the net it reaches has the most insane length that they catch of these books that you just really wouldn't expect to be bold.
And we'll, I'll, even though it'll take a moment, I'm going to list some of those books here in a bit. I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're talking about book banning in Tennessee with Christina Soontornvat, Angele Latham, and Bruce Berry. And let's for a moment bring in another voice, Amanda Smithfield. She's the librarian at Hume Fogg Academic Magnet High School, also co-chair of the Tennessee Association of School Librarians Legislative Committee. Welcome to This is Nashville.
Thank you for having me. Always happy to talk about books and what's going on here in Tennessee and what we see going on across the nation.
Well, it does seem that school district by school district, you have different responses, at least that kind of rise to the surface. But obviously, every school librarian is dealing with this to some degree. So what's different for you now because of this Appropriate Materials Act that was updated in 2024?
Yeah. So as was previously stated, as a librarian, there is no curriculum exception for the books or that I'm adding to the library. So, and the laws are so vague that it we have always, as librarians, evaluated books for to add to our school libraries. That there was always a reconsideration policy. We always had our list of books published online. But now what's happening is that I am questioning even when it goes with my curriculum. And so, for example, my school has anatomy as a class. But technically, I'm looking at the law and I can see where school board lawyers might be nervous here. Like, what is nudity? Like how do you define that? So even though I have anatomy as a class at my school, I can see where that fear of litigation could prevent librarians, or at the at even a level above that, of saying, hey, no, do not order any books on anatomy, even if you have anatomy as a class at your school.
That is so interesting. I mean, you talking through that one example just shows us how complicated this is, and that it's been dealt with forever. It's just becoming much more public when you have this kind of spotlight put on it. I don't see Metro Public Libraries or the school libraries in Metro aggressively pulling things from the shelves that we're hearing about. But can you talk about this idea of shadow banning?
Yes. So shadow banning was something that has been alluded to. And shadow banning is where either you as a librarian, but oftentimes it comes from someone above you, like, so say your principal or something, or even a message from your director of schools. So every school system has a reconsideration policy, and we always have. So I've been a librarian since 2003. And there was a form that a parent or student or a employee would fill out if they wanted a book to be reconsidered and like possibly removed from school libraries or changed to a different level. So maybe it's appropriate for high school, and so you had, you would have that judge. But now what's happening, and what has been happening, is what we call shadow banning, and that's where you have a lot of folks who are like, you're not actually going through the process. Like, no one's actually saying reconsider or putting in the book for reconsideration. You are getting an email saying, take these 390 books that were on the list in Wilson County and take them out of your library. And this is your director or your principal or whatever doing that. And so, you can imagine that as a librarian and as a school system employee, that puts you in a difficult situation, because your principal and your director of schools or whoever at central office is your boss, but yet the policy of the school system, whatever that may be, may not, is often not being followed.
Amanda Smithfield, jumping in on this conversation in the middle of the school day at Hume Fogg. Thank you so much for adding your perspective. We're going to jump back into it, but thank you for your time. I want to. We haven't heard a ton from Metro Nashville schools in terms of I don't think, Angel. Angel, have we heard of titles being pulled from the shelves in Davidson County?
I actually know of very little in Davidson County itself, particularly I think something we'll discuss later about the October letter from Tennessee Secretary of State Trey Hargett. Davidson County was actually left off of that list for libraries that needed to do their full book audit. There were about, I think, 4 counties, maybe 4 or 5 counties that were not included on that. So I've actually had very little information on any books pulled from Davidson County. Well,
but there are counties where this has become such a big deal that there's even litigation involved. In Rutherford County, the Board of Education, removed that 150 books we talked about. The ACLU of Tennessee is suing, filed on behalf of local families, and PEN America claims that the targeted books disproportionately are about race, LGBTQ identities, reflecting viewpoint-based censorship. Christina, maybe the ACLU wins, maybe they don't, but what kind of effect are you seeing in schools as you just have all of this swirl on this topic? Are there other effects, regardless of the outcome of a case like that?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, to me, this is the horrible consequences of book banning. It goes so much farther than just one book, or just the particular books that are getting banned. It's the pressure that we see on librarians. It's the pressure that we see on teachers, the stress. Right now in our country, we are in this huge reading crisis where we still have kids who are not up to reading level from losses during the pandemic. You've got only 14% of teenagers say they read a book for fun. You have kids who are graduating high school having never read a full novel before. Everyone's so distracted by screens, social media, AI. And so we really need our librarians and our teachers to be able to be on the front lines. We need to give them so much support, so much resources so they can throw all their energy into making sure kids become readers. But instead, what we're seeing is that they're feeling very demoralized. ETSU just did a survey with Tennessee teachers this last year, kind of the effects of Age-Appropriate Materials Act on them. And they're saying that they're seeing less student engagement because a lot of the books that are getting pulled, these are high-interest titles for students. Mm-hmm. They're very engaging, and the kids are just not going to be satisfied reading those same old classics that some people think they should read, and that it's negatively affecting their literacy and their reading skills. So it's really deep impacts that go so much further beyond just the particular titles.
A comment coming through the YouTube video stream, youtube.com/@WPLN. Rachel Kestner says, these laws are ridiculous. Librarians and teachers are being harassed unfairly. We also welcome comments on parents who are concerned with something that has been in the library. You can chime in there in the live video chat. We need to take a break. When we come back, we're going to look closely at a Trump directive, the state's response, and the fallout, particularly in Rutherford County. It's a show about book banning and protecting children. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners. And Curry Ingram Academy, now accepting applications for Camp Beach Creek at Curry Ingram and Brentwood. From robotics to water slides, designed to be a well-rounded summer of fun. More at curryingram.org/camp. And Parnassus Books, presenting an Indie Bookstore Day celebration featuring Ann Patchett signing lines, storytime with Clifford the Big Red Dog, and more. All day long on Saturday, April 25th. Details at parnassusbooks.net. And Bates Nursery and Garden Center, featuring new arrivals of annuals, perennials, Tennessee native plants, and more in time for spring gardening. Located minutes from downtown Nashville off Briley Parkway. BatesNursery.com.
Many Spaniards were shocked last year when the government announced that it would grant working papers to hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants. That program has run into snags, not enough civil servants to process the massive influx of paperwork, and conservative lawmakers trying to kill it with lawsuits. Hear that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 2 on 90.3 WPLN News.
I'm Blake Farmer, and this is Nashville. Well, happy National Libraries Week. We are not a library, but we did start in a library. WPLN stands for Public Library Nashville. So, we're celebrating. What started as a focus on school libraries and the material in them has expanded to policing public libraries in Tennessee, as in, the public libraries in your county of residence, to make sure that inappropriate books aren't available to children. Of course, one person's definition of what's inappropriate can be wildly different from what another person thinks. We're using the shorthand of book bans today. The issue isn't an outright ban, but limiting the access to children. We're going to look at an executive order from the White House and ultimately the dismissal of the now former library director in Rutherford County, Luann James. Our guests helping us understand the issue today are First Amendment reporter Angele Latham, Christina Soontornvat of Authors Against Banned Books, and opinion columnist Bruce Berry of the Tennessee Lookout. Reminder, we're streaming video at youtube.com/@WPLN if you want to jump in the conversation. There's a chat going there. So last year, President Trump issued an executive order called Defending Women from Gender Ideology, Extremism, and Restoring Biological Truth to the Federal Government. I don't even think it dealt with libraries, but Angel, did Tennessee libraries respond when that came out?
Yeah, so that order really wasn't particularly applicable to libraries at first. It does very much affect it, but we really didn't see any immediate action from it until October, when Tennessee Secretary of State Trey Hargett sent out a letter that referenced that order. And he referenced that order along with the 2022 Age Appropriate Materials Act as the impetus for public libraries, to go through their juvenile collections and purge anything that might run afoul of Trump's order or the Tennessee state standards.
Do we know why the Secretary of State was inspired to? I mean, it seemed like you could have just not said anything.
Right, yeah. That was something I actually dug into a lot because it really did come out of nowhere. And that was really the first bit on state action that we saw going against public libraries, not just school libraries. The past few years, a lot of legislative action and a lot of the community action have been to school libraries. And that's a lot of the confusion we've seen going forward from this order, was that this was the first time it was really gone to public libraries. And I did actually have some back and forth with his office about whether this was an order or not, because it does read to me as an order, and to a lot of reporters I actually discussed with a lot of people. I'm like, this was telling them they needed to do this. Here's a deadline. You could risk funding if you don't. But in fairness, he did reach out and he was like, "This is not an order." I said, "Please."
Yeah, he did. Well, and I guess he also thought he should put out a video to explain this more broadly. In January, James Ritter of the State Library and Archives put out this brief video with Secretary of State Trey Hargett trying to explain that this request of libraries to review materials was completely routine.
I mean, this is routine business for libraries. They do it all the time. They weed their collections, they buy new items.
It's ongoing.
That's right. Shelf space is limited, resources are limited, so they're always conscientious about their collections and reviewing it.
So it really is not out of the norm for this to be happening. And I also just want to thank libraries. How many have completed their review 3 weeks ahead of schedule?
Yeah, over 60 have completed the review. We really appreciate them for doing it. Professional, they're seeing things that they're moving to some different areas of the collection. In many cases, their collection was just perfectly fine.
Yeah, and I think they're doing a great job. And frankly, we made a request, we asked, we said please on multiple occasions. There's been no order, there's been no directive.
Bruce Berry, is that how libraries were feeling, that this was optional?
Well, two things about this. First of all, I guess it's comforting to know as a citizen that the Secretary of State really doesn't have the power to issue orders of this kind, or probably of just about any kind. It's an important position, responsible for some important functions in state government, but can't really do that. But I think that what's sometimes left out of this conversation is the fact that the analysis of the appropriateness of materials in a library has, as Hargett kind of said, always occurred. But the reason it's always occurred is because being a librarian is a professional calling, and
requires a master's degree.
A lot of what's going on here, whether we talk about state law, we talk about Hargett's directive, or we talk about Trump or any his executive order, any of this stuff, is kind of a rejection of the institutional professionalism of librarianship. We trust librarians as credentialed professionals to curate these collections. Nobody has a First Amendment right as an author. I'm a book author. I have no First Amendment right to have my book be in the library. If the professionals running a particular library don't want to use the public funds to buy my book, they don't have to. But the point is we trust them with those decisions. And all of this hoo-ha coming from the state around this stuff is essentially rejecting that professionalism. And I think that's part of the problem here.
Yeah, and I just want to add what Bruce says about we trust them. Surveys from every library show that 92% of parents say they trust librarians to choose the materials in school libraries, and 96% say they feel that children are safe in a library. So there's definitely a disconnect between what the vast majority of parents feel about librarians and about libraries and these legislators who are trying to push censorship and book banning.
On the video stream on YouTube, Ian Thaniel writes, kids can discover in a safe environment, a library, or they can do so in predatory, misinformed dark corners of the web. Controversial subjects are precisely what youth should feel safe to engage in. Let's dive into this situation in Rutherford County. Angel, am I right? The case in Rutherford County that led to the dismissal of the public library director, it's really unrelated to this age appropriateness act that we started talking about, right? It's what came down from Trey Hargett after Trump's order came through.
Yes, absolutely. This is sort of a two-pronged thing here. The order came through, or the directive, as I've been referring to it, that came through in October. And libraries were given, I believe it was either 60 or 90 days to complete this. It was over the holiday period. They were very short-staffed, and they managed to get it in, as did many libraries across the state. And there was a list of nearly 3,000 books that were flagged in Rutherford County libraries that Lou Anne James presented to the board. Yeah. And it came to a vote in January about whether those 3,000 books would be pulled, would be removed. During this vote, the books had already been taken off shelves and were actually stashed in an admin building, so they were not publicly accessible.
Really?
Yes. And the board narrowly voted at a very passionate, very packed meeting to keep these books on the shelves, with the addendum that board members could come forward with further lists that were more tailored to what books they thought had further concerns.
Yeah. Well, let me just read some of these, the things that were brought up, because it sounds like knowing now that Lou Anne James was trying to resist this order to flag 3,000 books. I mean, they were sort of making a point with this, it seems. For instance, Adam and Eve nude in the Garden of Eden, underpants shown during a cartwheel, fictional male rabbits get married, implied breastfeeding, a nude mummified body, like what you're talking about. Like, were the librarians just trying to make a point about the new guidance?
And you would really think so, looking at just the ones I pulled for my articles. Okay. You're like, oh, these are extreme examples. But the entire list was like that. I think my favorite one was there were Civil War undergarments shown on chickens. And that was pulled for nudity and lack of clothing. And all of these books were pulled pursuant to the guidelines that they were told that these were books of issue. The entire list was like that. And I think it was in February that board chair Cody York and a list that was created by him and one of the board member came forward with their very specific list of books. And that is kind of what led to Lou Anne James being fired, is that she refused, because he said that these books specifically...
A much shorter list, right?
A much shorter list. And she refused to move them. The request was to remove them from the juvenile section into the adult section. They were books, many were there was books on menstruation. They were books on children's anatomy that were specifically meant for children to learn about different, just growing up, puberty and stuff like that. And many of the books were LGBTQ focused. And he wanted those removed. He said they would cause gender confusion. He did specifically say that these books were being looked at on this list because of the viewpoints expressed in them, which is a very important First Amendment notion that is simply not allowed. You can't do viewpoint discrimination. And that's what Lou Anne James said. And that is what led to her removal. But all of this also happened after last year. There was a concerted effort multiple times in both Rutherford County and Sumner County to pass policies that removed transgender books. And that did pass in Rutherford County, but then was shortly revoked after a lot of pushback. It has not passed in Sumner County, though has been proposed, I think, 6 times now, and it has not passed. But all of this
Though
led
that's
up to
not
this
in the
moment.
state law, right?
Right.
That is not the state law is about sexual
Right.
things.
Yeah.
But not, yeah. I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We've got Angele Latham, Christina Soontornvat, and Bruce Berry helping us understand where Tennessee sits with book banning. Bruce Berry, I mean, obviously it's a school-based lawsuit, but already in Rutherford County, you've got the ACLU suing, and I'm sensing this is not just about, a policy, gone wrong in their opinion. It's like all the way to the top. First Amendment issue?
Yes. It's a First Amendment lawsuit that the ACLU, on behalf of a bunch of plaintiffs, ACLU acting as counsel, filed in federal court. And you mentioned earlier, some of the plaintiffs are kids in Rutherford County, and some of the plaintiffs are sort of authors. The actual plaintiff organization is PEN America, which represents authors. And the argument basically that they're making in the lawsuit is that Rutherford County Schools engages in the kind of viewpoint discrimination that Angel just referred to when they choose to limit access to books based on their content, as opposed to based on some other, perhaps legitimate basis for it. In the case of the students who are plaintiffs, it means they're being denied access to these materials. In the case of the authors, in theory represented by PEN America, it means that they're being denied their ability to share their constitutionally protected work because of viewpoint-based discrimination. Now, this lawsuit was filed last year. It's in the discovery phase, so it's early on in the whole long process of a federal lawsuit, but that's kind of more or less what it's about.
Well, and do you expect legal action over Dr. James' firing?
I don't know. She no doubt served at the pleasure of the library board, and they fired her for insubordination, they say, and she was defiantly insubordinate.
Yes.
She refused to carry out an order, to carry out a policy that they adopted. So I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not sure what the legal grounds would be for a lawsuit on her behalf.
I know she did retain a lawyer shortly after her firing, but I've spoken with this lawyer, and they are not able to comment yet on further lawsuits, but she does have a lawyer who is looking into the First Amendment implications of the firing. Got
it. In Rutherford County, beyond the books being removed that deal with LGBTQ and transgender issues, the library board also decided to eliminate 5 policies based on anti-censorship statements from the American Library Association, including the 1953 Freedom to Read policy, which says the freedom to read is essential to our democracy, and that making a wide diversity of views and expressions available to interested readers serves the public interest. Christina, for those who don't live in the book world, what does the American Library Association really have to do with this?
Yeah, I also want to point out that they did that on Right to Read Day during National Library Week, which is particularly gross. The American Library Association provides guidance. They provide, they have ethics that their librarians adhere to. They have this Library Bill of Rights. They stick up for libraries, and they're trying to enforce policies or put together policies that libraries can use to make sure that they are viewpoint neutral, to make sure that they are serving all of their community. So one thing that I want to point out is that, in a public library, especially one like Rutherford County that has many different sections, they have a children's section and a teen section and an adult section. The kids who are checking out their books from the library are doing that under their parents' permission. You cannot have a library card. A child can't have a library card without their parent being able to see what they're checking out. So it's not like the children are accessing materials without their parents knowing what's going on. And in a school library, parents have always had the ability to talk with their librarian, have a relationship with their librarian, and let them know these are certain books that I don't want my kid to access. And librarians have always been willing to work with parents to make sure that their kids are reading the books that they want to read. The important part is that we don't want specific parents to regulate what every child in the school or every child in the community has access to.
Yeah. is your sense that it's just a few who are now making this decision for more? Or I mean, it seems like there is real concern about these materials, whether you agree with that or not.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the concern is definitely inflamed by the groups that are pushing these book bans. So the American Library Association just released their latest data and found that 92% of censorship efforts are pushed by organized groups such as Moms for Liberty or by legislators that are influenced by them. So that's only 8% of the censorship that's coming from individual parents. So it is a small percentage, and those groups do a very good job of publishing certain excerpts of books that are inflammatory and saying this entire book is inappropriate because of this one excerpt taken out of context.
Well, we're going to get into what that sort of national picture looks like when we come back, but we've got to take a quick break. We'll zoom out a tad when we return, look at what's going on elsewhere in the state and the broader implications of what's going on right now related to books. Call it censorship, call it book banning, call it protecting children. We're going to be talking about it. Stay with us. This is Nashville.
Funding for This is Nashville comes from you, our listeners, and Wildwood Resort, an all-inclusive destination for executive retreats and team gatherings near Nashville on Cordell Hall Lake, with meeting spaces, waterfront lodging, and modern amenities. More at visitwildwood.com. And the Southern Environmental Law Center, reminding you this Earth Month that solutions to our greatest environmental challenges start in the South. Learn how SELC makes a difference by visiting selc.org. And the Hal Allen Clinic, specializing in minimally invasive robotic spine surgery and laser brain tumor surgery. For 40 years, the neurosurgeons of the Hal Allen Clinic have been national leaders in brain and spine surgery.
It's my first spring in Nashville. I'm Holly Kernan, president of Nashville Public Radio, and some mornings I walk along the banks of the Cumberland River. I listen as the city comes to life, the buzz of insects kissing the blooms, a lone barge moving slowly through the murky currents. Birds sing their hookup songs, trying to catch something more than a worm. Spring is nature's ode to hope, and I'm taking it in before the humidity takes over.
I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're seeing some of our first big clashes over this crackdown on the appropriateness of books available to children, both in schools and in broader public libraries. The Rutherford County Library Director lost her job, which we talked about, but this review is playing out statewide and sometimes in more subtle ways, which we'll talk about here as we end this hour. It's National Libraries Week, so we're spending some time in the stacks. So a few, my guests here in the panel, in the room, Christina Soontornvat, an author and Tennessee leader of Authors Against Book Bans, Bruce Berry, columnist with the Tennessee Lookout, Angele Latham, First Amendment reporter at USA Today and the Tennessean. Reminder, we're on youtube.com/@WPLN, where we're streaming video, and the chat is active today. So the most challenged book of 2025, according to the American Library Association, include two by Sarah Moss, I think her last name's pronounced, an extremely popular author, primarily known for romantasy. One of our producers happened to read maybe two of those and confirms quite explicit sexual content, also torture, violence, trauma. Maybe understandable why it's been challenged. Christina, are people trying to argue that kind of book should also be in school libraries?
It is in school libraries. It has been in high school libraries before. And I think that the argument there is that it does contain more mature content that teens should be looking at, not people who are younger than that, but that it serves a story and that that it's an engaging story, and it gets some kids very interested in reading, and they read lots and lots of books and become big readers because of it.
Interesting. Well, we actually had an entire episode that was about romance novels, smutty books, basically. And there was even discussion of this program that was basically to get people to read and to get teens having a conversation about consent, as in sexual consent.
Yes,
they were using these novels. So because I think there would be some listeners who would hear this like, I'm not sure kids need to be, well, it's like that's the kind of conversation you're talking about that might be useful.
Yeah. And I've also heard that, some people say that one of the reasons that those books are targeted in particular is because it is about a young woman who is taking power over her sexual life. She is the initiator of those experiences.
Kind of a feminism point.
Yeah, and I think there's some people who maybe don't agree with that. I also think it's one of these books that once it gets banned somewhere, it just grows and grows. And that's a lot of the books that you see on the most banned lists. Those lists get propagated, they get spread in Facebook groups, and they are so often not read by the people who are trying to ban them.
Why do such things get such traction in that Facebook group? Like, there's something real there that it's tapping into.
Yeah, I think there is. And, I've been at a school board meeting where someone has gotten up and read an excerpt from one of these books just like off the cuff. And I think if you're hearing something completely out of context and it's just those few sentences that are quite graphic or titillating or for whatever reason, it is kind of shocking. But that's not how you encounter that when you're reading that book. When you've bought into that book and you're reading the entire thing, you're reading the full thing in context. And kids, all, readers, this is part of a skill that you learn as a reader is when you get to something that you're not ready for, that you put the book down. And that it really is what happens.
You were talking about this ALA report that sort of gets into all the challenges that, more challenges in 2025, second highest year on record behind, just barely behind 2023. Also highlights this major shift, which you all referenced, that most challenges are not coming from individual parents, but from organized political groups and officials. That's like 90% of the challenges. And Bruce, that makes me just think, is this just all about politics, like a cultural wedge issue or something?
Short answer, yes. I think in a lot of respects it is. And
that would mean like parents are being used to.
Well, to some extent,
yeah.
right. We live in polarized times in a polarized country where everything becomes polarized. Red blue politics, conservative liberal, and I think this is that as well. And I was watching some of the video of the Rutherford County meeting where the librarian was fired, and first they listened to lots of citizens who came to the mic and talked. And one of those who was in favor of doing away with Miss James, with Lou Ann James, who thought they should fire her, said, and this is a quote, said, "We should replace her with someone who would put the souls of our children over a commitment to radical, blasphemous, satanic ideology." Mm-hmm. And the reason that struck my mind was because this wasn't somebody who was saying, let's replace her with someone who will follow the rules that are being made by the elected members of the board about what is or is not appropriate for children, but rather framed it as blasphemous, satanic ideology. And I think that points to the fact that this really is kind of yet another manifestation of just the way we polarized. The accusation is not that librarians are not doing their jobs well. It's that they're part of some radical movement to corrupt our kids.
But Angel, you First Amendment is your beat. Libraries have always done this where they decide what's appropriate for the children's section.
Right.
What makes that more controversial in this moment?
I think, kind of going back to Christina's point, is that you see a lot of these lists of books with either just excerpts or not even explanations get propagated to all these groups and these different people. I spoke with a woman, I think she was in White County, and I had found a list of books that she was proposing get banned in her county libraries, in her county public libraries. And one of the books actually had to do, it was like women's voting history in Tennessee. Like it was a history book. And it was a sizable list, but I flagged that one and I asked her, I was like, why is this on your list? And she's like, oh, I don't know. I didn't read it. And she texted me back, like 2 weeks later. She's like, hey, I read the book and I don't think it's a problem anymore.
But I presume it was on her list in a lot of cases because it was on somebody else's list,
correct.
Which was the point.
Yes, this list was shared with her. And she was like, no, surely, like, we have a reason for this to be on the list.
So in other words, you can pull Christina's talking about excerpting a book. You can pull an excerpt from a book that's probably quite graphic and then say, and that's just one example on this list of 100 books.
Right. And I see that a lot. And even Miss Moss's books, like they're on a lot of lists like that. And you'll see these lists get, it's kind of like a game of telephone, but with books, they get passed around to all these groups. And there are very legitimate concerns. There's people coming there and saying, I hear there's this. Oh my God, I don't want my kids reading that. But these lists often, they just grow and they grow and they grow. And they have these books that have nothing to do with the topics of concern or even sometimes any concerns. And you'll see a lot of this that kind of just grow, and then it gets to the legislators who are representing these people. One of the books mentioned in Hargett's letter is the book Fred Gets Dressed. It's the only book that is singled out in 27 of the 181 letters. And that book specifically was called out because it was tweeted 2 months earlier by conservative activist Riley Gaines. She tweeted about it, and then Congressman Johnny Garrett picked up, and he went to Sumner County and held it up and talked about that it was a horrible book.
What is Fred Gets Dressed?
It's an adorable book.
What is it, Christina?
It's about a little boy who once is running through the house naked, and he decides that he's going to have to get dressed for the day. And so he goes to his dad's closet and puts on his dad's clothes, and they don't quite fit right. He goes to his mom's closet. He puts on his mom's clothes. He puts on her makeup, and then he comes out and shows his parents, and they decide that instead of scolding him, they're going to all put on makeup and dress up.
Puts on makeup.
Yes, indeed.
And that's where it probably catches people.
I'm sure that does. There's also a bare naked bum in the book that is so hilarious and like so funny. It's really a book about your parents accepting you no matter what, and just the silly joys of being a kid.
I see. I'm Blake Farmer. This is Nashville. We're wrapping up our chat about, as if there's an ending. This chat will go on today, but about book banning in Tennessee. Mr. Patrick on YouTube writes, uncomfortable conversations with teens prepares them for the dangers of real life, makes them safer. Mr. Patrick, appreciate you chiming in there in the chat on the live video stream. Bruce, all this conversation has me thinking, can we have a thoughtful debate about whether a book is appropriate for kids right now? And I ask this because it seems like you either think that what's happening is book banning, or you think you've got to protect the children from these things, and you sort of have to pick a side. There are some books that we maybe ought to take a second look at. Can we have a thoughtful debate in this moment about appropriate and inappropriate topics?
Well, I think so if you have the right, the right context for such a conversation. And there's two different conversations here. One is about a particular book, the way you framed the question. Can we have a conversation about whether this or that particular book, Fred Gets Dressed or whatever, is appropriate? But also, can we have thoughtful conversations about the larger subject here? And I think that's important. You played early in the show that clip from the woman at a meeting who said, "Hey, we're not banning books. We're just protecting children." And I heard that and I thought, well, what you're doing really is both. Or at least you're attempting to do both at the same time, and you don't have to. You can do one without doing the other. And I think that to have the kind of constructive conversation that you're talking about, you have to find a way to be able to explain how, when librarians do the curating work that they do, they are protecting children, and they are protecting also democracy, a free society, the First Amendment. And they're doing so in a way that doesn't put children in harm's way. That's what the conversation to me needs to look like.
Amanda Smithfield, the librarian at Hume-Fogg High School, talked briefly about shadow banning and sort of this, like, without going through this process, just sort of trying to remove titles without any sort of process, just to avoid some controversy. Christina, I wonder what you're seeing in terms of this crackdown affecting children's authors, what they're writing, what libraries are buying? Like, how is this kind of spilling over into other parts of the book world?
Oh, yeah, it's having a huge effect. I mean, I hear from authors all the time wondering, like, can I write about this? Should I self-censor, soft censorship, because will my book not get acquired? Because then it won't get purchased in libraries, which is a huge, if you're a children's writer, the school and library market is make or break for you. I also have so many friends that before this huge rise in book banning, we were all going out and talking to schools, visiting with students, talking about writing, about reading, how to become a writer. And that has dropped off dramatically, especially for my friends who are LGBTQ or authors of color, just not getting invited. And sometimes it's explicit. Sometimes I have had friends who have talked about they were disinvited because they were gay, even though that's not what they speak about in their author visits. And some are just the invitations have just stopped coming. And so that's, if you think about what the impact that meeting an author can have on a kid for their love of reading, or maybe one day they grow up and tell their own stories, and we're just not having that anymore. It's just so heartbreaking.
Angel, I wonder if you're surprised, as somebody who watches, these First Amendment issues, like how much attention libraries are getting, like as Christina pointed out, like in a time when people aren't reading books as much, and we're doing all we can to get people to crack a book, and you can get all this information without ever leaving the house from some sort of screen or device. Like the outsized attention that libraries are getting right now, what does that tell you?
It tells me a lot about where people's vulnerability sits. I'm not sure of a better way to put that, but people, especially parents, I'm not a parent myself, but like you have a young child, the world is scary. There's a lot. We are in an age of just so much information is accessible all of the time. You can find anything at any moment. And a lot of parents express very genuine fear. Their kids might encounter something that they don't understand enough to give context to, and they're just concerned that their children will encounter this. And so libraries become this point where they connect with their community and express this fear. And I think sometimes that ends up overstepping on other people's First Amendment right to understand the world in the way they want to.
Well, thank you so much for helping us understand this issue just a little bit better today. Let me thank our panel, Bruce Berry from the Tennessee Lookout and board member at the ACLU of Tennessee, Angele Latham, who writes about the First Amendment for the Tennessean and for USA Today, and Christina Soontornvat, who is a children's author and also stands up for these issues. Thank you for being here. Thank you for tuning in this hour. This is Nashville, a production of Nashville Public Radio. Yesterday's show was really for the choir nerds among us. It was for anybody who might want to sing and harmonize with other people. Heard a lot of beautiful music while reminding ourselves of the communal act of singing in harmony is good for us. Listen in our podcast feed or at thisisnashville.org. You can also watch at youtube.com/@WPLN. Yes, and if you watch, I am wearing a choir tux. Today's episode produced by Mary Mancini, directed by Tasha A.F. Limley, Liv Lombardi, making us sound and look good. The masterminds behind our theme music you hear are LaRange and Namir Blade. Got thoughts on book bans? Our voicemail is listening, 615-760-2000. You can also find us on Instagram. I'm Blake Farmer. Go in peace.
Many Spaniards were shocked last year when the government announced that it would grant working papers to hundreds of thousands of undocumented immigrants. That program has run into snags, not enough civil servants to process the massive influx of paperwork, and conservative lawmakers trying to kill it with lawsuits. Hear that story next time on The World.
This afternoon at 2 on 90.3 WPLN News.
This is 90.3 WPLN.
Nashville Public Radio.
And 91.7 WHRS Cookeville.
Nashville's home for Morning Edition and NPR News. WPLN.org is where you can find more from WPLN News, including the Nash Villager, your human-powered newsletter and podcast, exploring